Apparently, the feeling that I've had over the past few weeks that Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party were in trouble, or that there was a certain panic, a palpable fear that Kamala Harris was having difficulty in the race, where Donald Trump and his campaign seemed to have a little bit more confidence. Feelings are a weird thing. There are times where you could feel something, and that feeling can be purely and totally yours. It may not necessarily be anybody else in the universe, just you. And so it's sometimes hard to know. It's always good, though, when you get confirmation that that feeling is not necessarily just you, but that feeling is shared, not just with the wider public, but also with the people who you are referring to or talking about. In this case, the Democratic Party. There seems to be palpable fear, even in the party itself, that Harris is blowing the presidential race. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. And I tried to give Miranda, there were difficulties on the tech end. For whatever reason, when he called back, I couldn't necessarily hear him. We tried it a few times. It didn't necessarily work. So I'm awake. I'm dressed. Let's do the news. Let's get a few shows in. One in particular that I want to start with is this fear, this panic in the Democratic Party that Kamala Harris is blowing this race. Now, I want to start this off by showing how she was received at an event in Texas that did not necessarily go all that well. This is Harris getting booed. Now, the night didn't even start off that well. The night started off with a woman screaming at a baby. No, seriously, a woman screaming at a baby. That black woman had to get involved. She was going to punch that baby. She was going to punch that baby in the face. I have no idea what that baby did to her, but whatever. It didn't go that well. It was followed up by a person in the stands having a seizure as abortion doctors on stage gave a speech. And of course, it continued with her getting booed. Now, the boos, I don't exactly know why the boos took place. I think apparently the media kept boosting that Kamala Harris was going to be at that rally. Donald Trump, Beyonce was going to be at the rally. Beyonce was at the rally. Beyonce came in, she waved, she gave a 3-minute speech, she walked away. And apparently the audience was not happy with that. There also seemed to be a Trump supporter or something in the audience. I couldn't entirely tell what was going on, and I couldn't necessarily entirely tell what they were basically screaming at Harris. Either way, that did not go well. I would argue that is endemic of what we've seen over the past month with this kind of polling shift where Trump seemed to be gaining momentum going into the final stages of the race, and Harris seems to be diminishing in momentum. That sentiment, as Axios is reporting, is not shared with me. Now, this is despite the fact that polling is, for the most part, relatively even. The issue is not, though, the national polls. A Democrat, rule of thumb, has to be up by about 5 points in order to win the national election because of the Electoral College. 5 points. Now, in the national polling is fundamentally drawn even. The most recent poll from CBS, right here, has the race. If the 2024 presidential election were held today between Kamala Harris and Democrat, Donald Trump Republican, who would you vote for? Harris, 50%. Trump, 49%. Someone else in the third party, 1%. That's dead even. That is dead even. When you go to the battleground states, it's a different animal. So if you go to state polls, Real Clear Politics, and you go to battleground states, Pennsylvania, Trump up 1. Pennsylvania, Trump up 1. This is Emerson. Wisconsin, Trump up 1. 49-48. North Carolina, Trump up 2. North Carolina, Trump up 2. This one is Maris. Arizona, another Maris vote, Trump up 1. Georgia, even. Ohio, Trump up 7. That, if you are Kamala Harris, does not look good. Especially if, again, you are going into the final stages of the race. All things being equal, you want to have a certain momentum going into the final stages. You don't want the situation to be, even, or for that matter, seeming like you're losing momentum going into those final stages. Donald Trump has started to hammer on a very specific point in one of his campaign videos. And it was a point that I have made over and over and over again as my thesis of why I think this has taken place over the last month when you're seeing her polling diminish. Or let's say Donald Trump's polling increase and her polling diminish, especially in that shocker poll that had a 6-point swing over the course of the last month. And it boils down to something very straightforward. If you have a country where 60 to 80% said the country is going in the wrong direction, and the person who was in charge while it was going in the wrong direction was the current president, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris comes out and says this.
Something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I know.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
She has been completely incapable of distinguishing herself from Joe Biden. And because she's been completely incapable of distinguishing herself from Joe Biden, meaning she's been asked multiple times, what would you do different? What would you do different? Would you have done anything differently over the course of this administration? And even more so, the question on The View, which is the one that they're continuously playing over and over again. If indeed, while you were in that administration, what would you have made a different decision as Joe Biden on many of the issues that came up during that term? And her answer is effectively, no, I wouldn't have done anything differently during the time that I was in that administration. That is rough. Meaning, if you have a situation where the majority of the public says, we think something is going wrong and we think this country is going in the wrong direction, and they say, hey, Kamala, would you have done anything differently than Joe Biden? And she says, well, I've been in the room with Joe Biden, and I was instrumental in many of the decisions that Joe Biden has made, and no, I wouldn't have done anything different. Hey, how are you different than Joe Biden? I can't really come up with an answer for how I'm going to be different. That is a problem. And when you're going around telling the American public that you're effectively the same, when the thesis of your main argument is, I'm a new way forward. I'm something different. I'm a new generation of politician. Yeah, but you're saying, A, I'm a new generation of politician, but B, I can't tell you anything that I've done differently or would have done differently than Joe Biden, nor can I tell you a difference between myself and Joe Biden. One eats the other. Meaning the one thesis of the case that you're going with in order to sell yourself to the American public is eaten alive by the secondary argument that you're making that you couldn't necessarily come up with a difference between yourself and Joe Biden. It's very weird. It's contradictory. And I would wager to you that the reason why Donald Trump is getting this kind of momentum going into the final stages is that Democrats, when behind the scenes, told Axios that they think she is blowing it. And I'll just read a few lines of it. I'm not going to read the entire article. A growing number of top Democrats tell us privately they feel Vice President Harris will lose, even though the polls is a con toss. Democrats admit they tend to be hand-wringing bedwetter doomsayers. But what's striking is how our private conversations with Democrats inside and outside her campaign reveal broad concerns that that little she says, or little she does say, or tries, seems to move the needle. That basically, it's something that I've pointed out. The more she talks, the worse it gets. Meaning, if you are in a situation where you need to change the context of a race, how do you do that? There could be debates, or there could be interviews, there could be town halls, there could be speeches. But the key point and the weirdness with Kamala Harris is the more she does those things, the less of a bang for the buck she gets. And I will wager to you that the more she does those things, the worse it gets for her, which puts her in somewhat of a bind. And how do you figure your way out of that? How do you move the needle when the very mechanism that is designed to move the needle, meaning your communication skills, don't seem to do that and seem to take you into the rears? Let's keep going. Another one. And a troubling sign for the campaign, top Democrats are already starting to point fingers at who would be more responsible for Harris' loss. President Biden is dragging his feet, or Harris herself. Quote, going down, unquote, top Democrat official texted. Democrats fear she may be too many cases against Trump and still hasn't fully revealed herself to voters who crave to know more. Quote, she is who she is, unquote, a longtime Democratic strategist said. Quote, let's hope it's enough. Oh, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. When they were telling Donald Trump that he needed to do something different, when the Trump campaign wasn't doing all that well in the polling, you could see a drop for Donald Trump in the poll, and Harris had a glow. And in one of the meetings, as one of the people were talking to Trump, Trump said, I am who I am. That has that same energy associated with it. Here's another one. In private conversations, Republicans seem shockingly confident given the 50-50 poll. So you get one situation where the people seem somewhat demoralized, and the other situation where, again, people are feeling, hey, it seems like we have momentum in the situation. Now, Democrats are arguing that Harris should be doing better because Donald Trump is just that bad. Here's another one. Democrats once felt good about Nevada, a state Biden won in 2020, but early voting has them panicked. John Ralston, the top Nevada elected official or expert, writes that the surge in early rural Republican voting, quote, a rural tsunami, unquote, is ominous for Harris. Quote, there is no good news in these numbers for Democrats, unquote. Pennsylvania continues to worry Harris, despite Biden winning there in 2020. Among the 7 swing states, it's the one campaign insiders think she has to absolutely win, with signs that GOP momentum in the Senate race. And just to be clear, it's not just GOP momentum in the Senate race. It's also, right here, Frank and Marshall poll, Pennsylvania, Trump up 1. Emerson poll, Trump up 1. Pennsylvania is a fascinating state. Pennsylvania was one of those states that for the last 50 years, Democrats basically owned. It was not a swing state for the last 50 years or so, give or take. And then you get a Republican winning it. I believe it was Trump that won it. And then all of a sudden start teeter-totter. In which case, this is another state that Democrats started to lose. Became a swing state. In another interesting case, Harris' campaign apparently doesn't want Joe Biden near her campaign, which is pretty wild considering she can't distinguish herself from that same Joe Biden. Right here. President Biden wants to campaign for Vice President Harris in the last days before the election. Harris' campaign responding, we'll get back to you. 3 people familiar with the dynamic told Axios. One person familiar with the situation compared it to a slow-moving breakup. Harris' team and her allies respect Biden's service, but are wary of further tying Harris to Biden's unpopular presidential campaign. Basically, they don't want Biden on the campaign trail because they believe Biden is unpopular. Biden is sitting at about a 39% approval rating, and they don't want him anywhere near her. Let's keep going. He's a reminder that for the last 4 years, not the new way forward, another person said, familiar with the situation, and a nod to Harris' campaign slogan. Biden's team is held open, days open for campaigning, only for Harris' team to let those days pass, to people familiar with the matter told Axios. There's also reporting that Biden announced, I'm going to Pittsburgh, and which took the Kamala Harris campaign by surprise. Now, the Biden campaign, or Harris, one of which, basically said, no, really, we're working with them, we're still united, we're still together. But it doesn't seem to really be the case. And again, as I keep pointing out, the thing that Donald Trump is hammering on is transgender rights. There's that. But also on this issue that these two people are the same. These two people are the same. There's not a bit of daylight between Harris and Joe Biden. And again, nailing the clip that I kept pointing out weeks ago was a problem for Harris.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
There's not much that comes to mind, and I've been a part of the decisions that had impact. So the public believes the country is going in the wrong direction. You go to The View and say, no, I can't distinguish myself from Joe Biden. And the big decisions that Joe Biden has made, I was right there in the room with him, adding my input to those decisions. It's not good. Now you don't want to be on the campaign trail with him. Look, the point is, there's panic in the Democratic Party, and they have a right to panic. When you're going into the final stages, you want the wind behind your back. You don't want a situation where it seems as if you're sputtering and the other guy seems to be going up in the polling. We'll see what happens. This doesn't, by any definition, means that Kamala Harris loses this race. It does mean that the Democrats, in many respects, believe she may. You guys are listening to Old Habits Die Hard. This is Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. Like, share, subscribe. You can support through PayPal, Patreon. I'm going to be doing this. In fact, I'm probably going to do a few more shows today. So, if you enjoy the content, at the very least, give it a like. If you really love it, support the content through PayPal or Super Chats. Thanks all. I'll see you guys in a few.